cheating wife failed at hiding the truth. Samantha had always been good at keeping secrets. She prided herself on her ability to juggle multiple roles seamlessly, a loving wife to her husband, Daniel, a dedicated mother, and a hard-working professional. However, lately, her carefully curated life had begun to crack under the weight of her deception. For months, Samantha had been seeing someone else. It started innocently enough, a flirtatious conversation with a colleague, Mark, over lunch. One meeting led to another, and before long, their relationship had crossed lines Samantha promised herself she'd never break. Yet, she believed she could keep everything under control, hiding the affair behind a wall of lies. Daniel, however, was no fool. Though Samantha worked hard to mask her guilt, little signs began to appear. She started coming home later than usual, her explanations riddled with inconsistencies. Her phone, once left lying around without care, was now constantly clutched in her hand or face down on the table. When Daniel asked about the sudden change in behavior, Samantha laughed it off, accusing him of overthinking. But the truth had a way of revealing itself. One evening, while Samantha was in the shower, Daniel's suspicions reached a boiling point. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand with a message preview. Asterisk, I can't wait to see you again, Samantha. Last night was incredible. Asterisk, the name on the screen was saved as Mandy, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. Fueled by suspicion, Daniel unlocked her phone. She had underestimated how much he knew about her habits, including her passcode. What he found confirmed his worst fears, an ongoing stream of messages, photos, and plans exchanged with Mark. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the sheer effort Samantha had put into hiding it. When confronted, Samantha tried to deny everything. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, her voice trembling. But the evidence was undeniable, and Daniel wasn't interested in her excuses. Her web of lies unraveled as she struggled to justify herself, the truth spilling out in fragments between her sobs. You could have just told me the truth, Daniel said coldly, his disappointment cutting deeper than his anger. But instead, you chose to betray me and lie about it. Samantha's attempts to hide her affair had failed miserably, and in doing so, she had destroyed the trust that once defined their marriage. In the end, it wasn't just the affair that ended things. It was her inability to come clean. Daniel packed his bags that night, leaving Samantha to confront the ruins of the life she had built, and the truth she had so desperately tried to conceal. The silence in the house after Daniel left was suffocating. Samantha sat on the couch, clutching her phone, her mind racing with regret and panic. She tried calling him, but he ignored every attempt. Her once perfect world had crumbled in a single night, and there was no one to blame but herself. Samantha knew she had made a terrible mistake. Mark, the man she had risked everything for, was nowhere to be found. When she texted him about what had happened, his response was cold. Asterisk, I told you not to let this blow up. I can't be involved in your mess. Asterisk, that was the last message she received before he blocked her. The irony was bitter. She had jeopardized her marriage for someone who clearly didn't care about her beyond their stolen moments. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had been nothing more than a fleeting distraction to Mark, while Daniel had given her his entire heart. Over the next few days, Samantha tried to salvage what was left. She reached out to Daniel's friends, hoping they could mediate, but they refused to get involved. She even visited his workplace, but he avoided her completely. Her desperation grew as she realized the extent of the damage she had caused. Then came the final blow. Divorce papers delivered to her doorstep. Samantha stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. She didn't want to believe it was over, but the reality was undeniable. Daniel wasn't coming back. Weeks turned into months, and Samantha was forced to confront the fallout of her choices. She had lost not just her husband, but the respect of her friends and family. Her colleagues whispered about her behind her back, and even her children, though too young to fully understand, sensed the tension. In her moments of solitude, Samantha couldn't help but replay every decision that led her to this point. She realized too late that the thrill of secrecy wasn't worth the cost. She had traded a lifetime of love and stability for a fleeting affair that meant nothing in the end. Meanwhile, Daniel began to rebuild his life. Though heartbroken, he leaned on his friends and family for support. In time, he found peace in knowing he deserved better, someone who valued honesty and loyalty as much as he did. As for Samantha, she spent the rest of her days haunted by the memory of what she had lost. No matter how much she wished she could undo her actions, the truth remained. She had failed at hiding her betrayal, and the consequences were hers to bear forever. Months after the divorce was finalized, Samantha found herself living a life that felt alien to her. The family home was sold, and she moved into a modest apartment. The walls seemed to echo with loneliness, a stark contrast to the warm laughter that once filled her life. Her children stayed with Daniel most of the time, visiting her only on weekends. Though she cherished those visits, the strained dynamic between them was undeniable. Her son, Jake, barely spoke to her, preferring to spend his time with Daniel. Her daughter, Emily, though more forgiving, often asked innocent but painful questions. Asterisk, why doesn't Daddy stay here anymore? Asterisk, Samantha would force a smile and say something vague, but the guilt clawed at her each time. Professionally, things weren't much better. Word of her affair had spread among her colleagues, and though no one openly confronted her, she felt their judgment. Mark had left the company shortly after the scandal, and Samantha found herself ostracized by those who once considered her a friend. One rainy evening, Samantha sat on her couch scrolling through old photos. She stopped at one from a family vacation. A candid shot of Daniel holding Jake on his shoulders, while Emily clung to Samantha's hand. They were all laughing, the epitome of happiness. The memory felt like a lifetime ago. She couldn't resist the urge to reach out. Picking up her phone, she typed a message to Daniel. Asterisk, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever express, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I was selfish, and I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope one day you can forgive me. Asterisk. She stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. She didn't expect a reply, and she didn't get one. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha threw herself into therapy, hoping to understand why she had sabotaged her own happiness. Her therapist encouraged her to focus on rebuilding her self-worth and to take accountability for her actions without expecting forgiveness from others. Meanwhile, Daniel had begun dating again. Though hesitant at first, he eventually met someone who brought light back into his life. Her name was Rachel, a kind, understanding woman who had also experienced heartbreak. Their connection was genuine, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt hopeful about the future. When Samantha learned about Rachel through mutual friends, it stung. Not because she wanted Daniel back. She knew that chapter was closed, but because it was a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. Years later, at Jake's high school graduation, Samantha and Daniel crossed paths again. Though cordial, there was a noticeable distance between them. Rachel was by Daniel's side, radiating warmth and support. Samantha congratulated them both, forcing a smile even as her heart ached with regret. As the ceremony ended and families gathered for photos, Samantha stood off to the side, watching Daniel laugh with their children and Rachel. She realized then that she had not only lost her husband, but also the life they had built together, a life she could never get back. Her punishment wasn't just losing Daniel. It was living every day with the knowledge that she had destroyed her own happiness. And as she walked to her car alone, she vowed to never repeat the mistakes that had cost her everything. But some lessons she knew came far too late. As Samantha drove home from Jake's graduation, the reality of her solitude weighed heavily on her. The streets blurred under the glow of streetlights as memories of her family flickered in her mind like a cruel slideshow. She had made progress in therapy, but nights like this reminded her of how much she had lost and how far she still had to go. Her children were growing up fast, and she felt the widening gap between them. While Emily was still somewhat open to her, Jake had built a wall she couldn't break through. He was polite but distant, and his preference for Daniel's company was evident. Samantha couldn't blame him. She had been the one who shattered their family, and trust, once lost, was hard to rebuild. Determined to mend the bond with her children, Samantha began showing up more for them. She volunteered to help with their school projects, attended every sports game and recital, and even reached out to Daniel to discuss co-parenting strategies. Though their communication remained formal, Daniel appreciated her effort to be more present for the kids. One weekend, Samantha planned a small outing with Jake and Emily. She took them to a park they used to visit as a family, hoping to spark some nostalgia. As they sat on a picnic blanket, she turned to Jake. "Jake, I know I haven't been the mom you deserve these past few years," she began hesitantly. "I made choices that hurt you, your dad, and our family, and I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I hope I can earn your trust again." Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring at the grass. Finally, he looked up at her. "You really hurt Dad," he said bluntly. "I don't understand why you did it." Samantha's throat tightened. "I hurt everyone, Jake, and I don't have a good excuse. I was selfish and didn't think about the consequences. If I could go back and undo it all, I would in a heartbeat." Emily, who had been silently listening, spoke up. "But you're trying now, right?" she asked, her voice softer. "You're not going to mess up again." Samantha nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm trying every day, and I'll never stop trying to make things better for you too." It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. Jake didn't say much after that, but he didn't pull away when Samantha hugged him later that day. For Samantha, it was a small yet meaningful step forward. Meanwhile, Daniel's relationship with Rachel continued to flourish. Rachel had a natural ability to connect with Jake and Emily, and though Samantha struggled with jealousy at times, she reminded herself that Rachel's kindness was a positive influence on her children. Over time, Samantha reached a point where she could genuinely appreciate Rachel's presence in their lives. As the years passed, Samantha focused on self-improvement and rebuilding her relationships. She found fulfillment in volunteering and eventually started a support group for people grappling with guilt and regret. Helping others heal became her way of finding redemption. Though her bond with Daniel was never restored, they eventually found a comfortable co-parenting rhythm. At family milestones, weddings, graduations, and celebrations, they could share the same space without animosity. Samantha remained an outsider in the life she once shared with Daniel, but she took solace in knowing she had at least begun to repair her relationships with her children. The pain of her mistakes never completely faded, but Samantha learned to live with it, using it as a reminder to value the connections she still had. Life would never be what it once was, but she vowed to make the most of what remained. And though her past could not be undone, her future was still hers to shape.